One day I believe I make a major discovery when I believe I was able to place the tomb of Cleopatra in an abandoned temple west of Alexandria. And from that moment, everything changed for me.
They told us she was the most beautiful woman in history, the seductress who brought Rome to its knees.
Cleopatra is one of the most powerful women ever to come out of the ancient Mediterranean world. She ruled Egypt for 21 years, from 51 to 30 BC.
But what if everything we believed was a lie? New DNA analysis and forensic reconstruction have revealed something terrifying. The DNA of Cleopatra has finally been analyzed, and what it revealed is absolutely horrifying. Her greatest battle wasn't against Rome. It wasn't against Caesar or the entire might of the ancient world. Her greatest battle was against her own biology. What you're about to discover will shatter the myth of Cleopatra forever, because the truth is far darker and far more terrifying than any Hollywood movie could portray. Stay with me. This journey is about to get very, very dark. The Martinez Breakthrough. For 2,000 years, Egypt's sands have guarded one specific secret, the final resting place of Queen Cleopatra herself.
Egypt, a land of ancient treasures and hidden secrets. Of all its kings and queens, one is still cloaked in mystery: Cleopatra.
Most experts say she's gone forever, lost under Alexandria's streets, swallowed by earthquakes and time. But one woman refused to accept that. Kathleen Martinez, a criminal lawyer turned archaeologist from the Dominican Republic, didn't treat this like a history lesson. She treated Cleopatra's disappearance like a cold case homicide. While everyone searched in obvious places, Martinez looked 30 miles west of Alexandria to a forgotten temple called Taposiris Magna. In 2022, the ground revealed something impossible. A tunnel. Not just any tunnel, a geometric miracle stretching over 4,300 feet through solid bedrock, 6 feet high, heading toward the Mediterranean Sea. But why? Why tunnel 40 feet underground through dangerous rock? You don't build a mile-long passage for a minor site. The discovery of a sunken ancient port suggests this was a major hub. Martinez's theory is terrifying. Cleopatra wasn't just hiding from death. She was hiding from Rome's humiliation. She wanted burial with Mark Antony, immortalized as the goddess Isis. She buried herself where no one would ever look. And Martinez may have found the entrance, but while we haven't found the queen yet, evidence uncovered points to a dark truth about her dynasty. The Golden Tongues.
Unearthed 16 burial sites and tombs cut into rock, with one containing a mummy bearing a tongue made of gold.
Inside the complex, the team made a chilling discovery: 16 rock-cut tombs containing mummies. But when archaeologists examined the crumbling faces, they saw something glittering: gold. Inside their mouths were golden tongue amulets. Ancient Egyptians believed you needed to speak to Osiris, lord of the underworld, to survive the afterlife. A golden tongue grants golden eloquence, power to speak to gods. But why here? Why at this specific temple? Martinez believes these weren't random aristocrats. They were Cleopatra's inner circle, buried here with power to announce their queen's arrival. We're not digging through a graveyard. We're standing in a royal necropolis. If the courtiers are here waiting, the queen must be close. But while Martinez inches toward Cleopatra's DNA, we already have a key to her genetic code, or so we thought. To see Cleopatra's face, we just need to look at the bones of the sister she murdered. The blood rival. History remembers Cleopatra as a seductress, but her family was a shark tank. Her biggest threat wasn't a Roman general. It was her sister, Arsinoe IV. When Cleopatra was exiled, Arsinoe seized the throne. When Caesar arrived, Arsinoe led armies against him. This warrior princess nearly defeated one of history's greatest commanders, but history is written by victors. Arsinoe was captured, dragged to Rome in chains, forced to march in Caesar's triumph. Roman crowds wept for the teenage girl, and that sympathy saved her life. She was exiled to the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, Turkey. She thought sacred ground would protect her. She was wrong. In 41 BCE, Cleopatra persuaded Mark Antony to commit an unthinkable act. Assassins dragged Arsinoe from the temple and slaughtered her. It was sacrilege that shocked the ancient world. But for us, 2,000 years later, it provided a location. In the 1900s, archaeologists in Ephesus found a tomb called the Octagon. Inside was a skeleton, a young person. The timeline fit, the location fit. If this was Arsinoe, we had Cleopatra's genetic code. We could answer questions about her ethnicity, health, lineage. But recently, 2025 analysis gave us an answer no one expected. The shattered mirror. This skeleton was our only mirror to Cleopatra's face. Scholars saw a queen's sister, possible African heritage, answers to ancient riddles. But modern technology shattered that mirror. In 2022, the University of Vienna located the long-lost skull in their archives. Using micro-CT scans, they created high-resolution maps and drilled into the densest bone that preserves DNA. January 2025. The results revealed a medical horror story. The skeleton isn't Arsinoe. It isn't a 20-year-old woman. The DNA proved a Y chromosome. The sister is a boy, an adolescent between 11 and 14, and he was suffering. Scans revealed severe developmental disorders, stunted jaw, asymmetrical twisted skull, possibly Treacher-Collins syndrome, or severe rickets. This wasn't a healthy rival. This was a child with a face misshapen by genetic tragedy. His DNA traces to Italy or Sardinia, not Egypt. Why would a deformed, sickly Italian boy be buried in one of the ancient world's most prestigious tombs? A heroon built for heroes? Was he a sacrifice? A hidden royal bastard whose existence was too shameful or dangerous? The scientific proof of Cleopatra's African lineage was an illusion built on misidentification. So where does that leave us? We're back to the historical record. Cleopatra was the product of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek family ruling Egypt. And if you want to know what she looked like, look at the terrifying family tree she climbed. Because we know exactly who her parents were. And that reality is darker than any debate about skin color. The family tree from hell. The boy in Ephesus hid a secret. But in Alexandria, the genetic nightmare was official royal policy. Cleopatra's family tree didn't expand like a normal pyramid. It collapsed inward, what geneticists call pedigree collapse. The Ptolemies were paranoid about keeping power absolute and bloodline pure. So they adopted ancient pharaonic incest. They didn't marry distant cousins. They married full siblings. Over and over for 300 years. Historians believe Cleopatra's parents, Ptolemy XII and Cleopatra V, were likely full siblings. Her grandparents were probably uncle-niece or brother-sister. Geneticists estimate Cleopatra's coefficient of inbreeding at over 45%. A child of first cousins has about 6%. Cleopatra's was 7 times higher. Look at the Habsburgs of Spain who practiced similar inbreeding. Charles II, the bewitched, couldn't speak until age 4, couldn't walk until 8. His deformed jaw meant he couldn't chew food. His autopsy stated his heart was the size of a peppercorn. His inbreeding coefficient was 25%. Cleopatra's was nearly double. Why does this happen? Homozygosity. Normally, your mother's recessive disease genes are covered by your father's dominant healthy genes, a biological safety net. But when parents are siblings carrying identical flaws, there's no safety net. Same errors repeat. Same weaknesses compound. Cleopatra should have been a disaster. Deformities, cognitive impairment, shortened lifespan. But history says she was brilliant, spoke 9 languages, charmed Rome's most powerful men, commanded armies. How? Was she a one-in-a-million genetic miracle? Or have we missed the signs of her suffering all along? To answer that, look at her ancestors, the genetic time bombs. The genetic time bombs. If you want to understand what Cleopatra was fighting against, look at her great-grand-uncle Ptolemy VIII. Because of the incestuous family tree, he's not just a distant relative. He's a direct genetic mirror. And he was a walking medical catastrophe. They called him Physcon, which translates to potbelly. But that's being polite. That's like calling a hurricane some wind. Historical records describe him as morbidly obese, with limbs so weak they couldn't support his massive frame. He literally had to be held up and walked around by servants. He wore thin, transparent robes that horrified Roman visitors who saw him. But look closer at the ancient descriptions. This wasn't just obesity. Sources mention specific symptoms: a swollen neck, prominent, bulging eyes, shortness of breath, lethargy so severe he could barely function. Then examine Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, nicknamed the flute player. He was described as self-indulgent, weak, physically soft, with strange emotional volatility. These aren't just character flaws or personality quirks. These are symptoms. Modern medical historians examining the Ptolemaic dynasty see a clear pattern of genetic metabolic disorders. They see evidence of multi-organ fibrotic conditions. They see a family line plagued by thyroid disorders and hormonal chaos. And most terrifying of all, they see the unmistakable markers of Graves' disease, an autoimmune disorder that attacks the thyroid gland. Graves' disease causes exophthalmos, which means bulging eyes. It causes goiter, which is a swollen neck. It causes exactly what the ancient sources describe. But here's where the diagnosis becomes truly terrifying. Graves' disease doesn't just affect how you look. It fundamentally changes how you act. It floods your body with thyroid hormones, creating a state of dangerous hyperstimulation. Symptoms include manic energy, rapid speech, insomnia, heat intolerance, tremors, and erratic high-stakes behavior. Does that sound familiar? Historians have always praised Cleopatra for her boundless vitality. They marvel at how she could work through the night, how she was constantly in motion, how she had seemingly inexhaustible energy. We've framed this as genius, as exceptional capability. But medical anthropologists are now asking a much darker question. Was Cleopatra's legendary energy actually a symptom? Was the fire that made her so compelling, so charismatic, so unstoppable, was that fire actually a thyroid storm passed down from her uncle? A genetic condition that made her body burn too hot, too fast, consuming her from within? Let's look at the physical evidence we actually have, starting with the coins. When we analyze the silver tetradrachms minted during Cleopatra's reign, we see distinctive family traits. She has the prominent Ptolemaic nose, a strong, hooked, aquiline nose. She has a jutting chin. She has a thick neck. These aren't the delicate features of a beauty queen. These are the features of a survivor bearing the genetic markers of her family. The Ptolemaic line was plagued by fibrodysplasia and bone density issues. In highly inbred populations, the skeletal structure often weakens. The jaw malforms, exactly like we saw with the boy in Ephesus. And what about obesity? Ptolemy VIII was grotesquely fat. Did Cleopatra inherit that genetic predisposition? Some experts speculate her famous petite stature wasn't natural at all. It was warfare. If she carried the gene for the morbid obesity that crippled her uncle, maintaining a normal weight would have been a constant, agonizing battle against her own metabolism. Her petite frame might have been the result of hyperthyroidism burning calories at a dangerous rate, combined with what must have been near-starvation discipline. So here's the question that divides scientists. Did she escape? Or did she just hide it really, really well? Victim or miracle? This is the great debate raging through academic circles right now. two competing theories about Cleopatra's genetics, the medical victim theory versus the genetic miracle theory. Let's examine both, because the truth might be more complex than either extreme. The medical victim theory. This theory argues that Cleopatra didn't escape the genetic catastrophe at all. She simply compensated for it with intelligence and chemistry. The evidence comes from an unlikely source, the ancient historian Plutarch. He never used the phrase genetic defects, but he left us crucial clues that medical anthropologists have recently connected. First, the famous carpet scene. Hollywood shows Cleopatra dramatically rolling out of a Persian rug. But Plutarch actually writes that she climbed into a bed sack, essentially a linen laundry bag, and was tied up and carried on the back of a single servant named Apollodorus. Think about the physics of that. To be bundled into a bag and carried like a backpack by one man implies she was incredibly light, possibly under 90 pounds. She wasn't a tall, statuesque figure. She was tiny, possibly even growth-stunted. Second, Plutarch explicitly critiques her appearance. In his Life of Antony, he writes that her actual beauty was not in itself so remarkable. He insists her power came from her voice, her intelligence, her wit, not her physical form. When you overlay these ancient observations with a 45% coefficient of inbreeding, petite starts to look like growth restriction. This theory suggests she was physically frail, possibly fighting chronic pain, perhaps even battling the cognitive fog that comes with thyroid disorders. And she compensated with sheer intellectual brilliance. The genetic miracle theory. This theory takes a completely different approach. In genetics, there's a concept called the roll of the dice. Even with catastrophic inbreeding levels, it's statistically possible, though rare, to inherit the clean copies of genes. Consider the evidence. Cleopatra's siblings were weak. Her brother Ptolemy XIII was a child puppet who drowned in the Nile. Her sister Arsinoe was captured and killed. Yet Cleopatra lived to 39. She bore 4 healthy children, proving she was fertile, which is usually the first thing destroyed by inbreeding. She commanded naval forces in actual battle. She survived multiple assassination attempts and political coups. She may have been what geneticists call a mosaic survivor. While her family tree collapsed around her, she somehow walked through the genetic fire without major burns. She inherited Greek intellect and Egyptian cunning, but dodged the metabolic collapse and facial deformities. But here's what I think is most likely. Biology always collects its debt. Even if she escaped the visible deformities, she carried the burden. The manic energy, the high-stakes risk-taking, the legendary charisma, these might not have been personality traits. They may have been psychological echoes of a brain wired by centuries of incest. And here's the darkest speculation of all. Whether she was a miracle or a victim, Cleopatra knew something was desperately wrong. She grew up watching her family decay. She understood the pattern, and this changes how we view her entire romantic history. The biological rescue mission. Historians usually frame Cleopatra's relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony as political alliances. They say she seduced these men for military power, for armies, for Roman protection. But what if she wanted something far more valuable than legions? What if she was seeking fresh DNA? Think about this carefully. Cleopatra was married to her brother Ptolemy XIII by Egyptian tradition, then to her other brother, Ptolemy XIV. By all dynastic customs, she should have had children with them. That's how the Ptolemies had maintained the throne for 3 centuries. But she refused. She had 0 children with her brothers. Instead, she turned to Rome. She turned to Julius Caesar, a man with absolutely no genetic connection to her family. Then to Mark Antony. What if this wasn't just about building political alliances? What if Cleopatra was executing a desperate biological rescue mission? She knew her bloodline was collapsing. She'd seen it happen to her uncles, her siblings, her ancestors. She understood that one more generation of incest would produce genetic monsters, children like the deformed boy in the octagon tomb. So she did something revolutionary. She brought in completely unrelated DNA from Rome's most powerful men. She wasn't just trying to save Egypt from Roman conquest. She was trying to save her children from the genetic spiral that had created her. She was desperately trying to transform the collapsing ladder of her family tree back into a healthy, expanding pyramid. And that makes her story even more tragic. Because despite her brilliance, despite her courage, despite everything she tried to do, Rome still conquered Egypt. Her children with Antony were captured and marched through Rome in chains. Her biological rescue mission failed. But if this theory is correct, it means Cleopatra understood genetics 2,000 years before Mendel. She understood heredity before modern science even had words for it. The pharmacologist queen. If we accept that Cleopatra was fighting a medical victim battle, suffering from chronic pain due to bone abnormalities or the manic symptoms of Graves' disease, it raises an impossible question. How did she function? How do you command armies when your bones ache? How do you negotiate with Rome when your thyroid is racing your heart to dangerous levels?
The death that was awaiting to Cleopatra in Rome. So she knew she couldn't go there. And then she was a woman of honor. She didn't want to be disgraced.
The answer might lie in a skill historians often overlook. She wasn't just a queen, she was a chemist. We all know the famous story of the pearl. To win a bet with Mark Antony about who could throw the most expensive dinner, she took a priceless pearl earring, dropped it into vinegar, waited for it to dissolve, and drank it. History treats this as pure decadence. But look at it through a scientist's eyes. That's a deliberate chemical reaction. Calcium carbonate reacting with acetic acid. She understood the properties of matter. She understood transformation at the molecular level. And if she understood how to manipulate pearls, she absolutely understood how to manipulate plants. Egypt was the pharmaceutical capital of the ancient world. If Cleopatra was living with chronic genetic pain, she had access to the most sophisticated medicine available. Opium, harvested from the poppy fields of Thebes, the ultimate ancient painkiller. Did she use it to numb the ache in her genetically compromised joints so she could stand tall through endless diplomatic receptions? Kai-Fi, a complex temple incense known for powerful sedative properties. Plutarch wrote that its scent lulled one to sleep and loosened daily tension like a knot.
This was used for the nighttime. So it could be used for medicinal to help against stress or depression, against anxiety. It was mostly used for temples when they closed them in the evening.
For a woman possibly trembling with hyperthyroid energy, Kai-Fi wouldn't be perfume. It would be medicine. Desperately needed medicine. Blue lotus, a mild psychoactive flower steeped in wine, producing euphoria and a floating sensation. We talk about her legendary charisma, how she could bewitch powerful men with her mere presence. But was that charisma natural? Or was it chemically induced? Was her magnetic, high-energy allure actually a carefully calibrated cocktail of blue lotus wine and adrenaline, keeping her floating above the constant pain of her own? Was her magnetic, high-energy allure actually a carefully calibrated cocktail of blue lotus wine and adrenaline, keeping her floating above the constant pain of her own body? And finally, consider her face itself. We know Cleopatra wrote a book on cosmetics called Cosmeticon. Fragments were quoted by later physicians like Galen. This wasn't just a queen buying makeup. This was original research. Why would she dedicate time to studying cosmetics at a molecular level? If the potbelly gene gave her skin problems, or if Graves' disease gave her a swollen neck and bulging eyes, her obsession with cosmetics wasn't vanity. It was camouflage. She may have experimented with kohl and eye makeup to reshape eyes that were too prominent. She may have designed elaborate broad collars and jewelry specifically to hide a goiter. She created ointments, perhaps, to smooth skin ravaged by metabolic disorders. Cleopatra was arguably the world's first biohacker. A brilliant woman trapped in a failing body, using every tool of chemistry, botany, and art to project the image of a living goddess. while privately treating herself like a medical patient. She won the war for her legacy by ensuring the monster was hidden and only the goddess remained visible. But right now, 40 feet beneath the bedrock of the Mediterranean coast, Kathleen Martinez is about to do the one thing Cleopatra feared most. She's about to wash off the paint. The tomb awaits. And this brings us back to where we started. Deep beneath the Taposiris Magna Temple,
Kathleen Martinez was granted a temporary license to dig at Taposiris Magna.
Kathleen Martinez is still digging. For 20 years, she's been hunting for the final resting place of the last pharaoh. And thanks to that massive tunnel, that geometric miracle, she's closer than anyone has ever been. But after everything we've analyzed today, the stakes of this discovery have fundamentally changed. When we started this journey, we were looking for a legend. We were looking for the seductress who charmed Rome, the beauty played by Elizabeth Taylor, the goddess Isis incarnate. But science is preparing us for something completely different. If Martinez breaks through that final wall and finds the sarcophagus, she won't just be uncovering a queen. She'll be uncovering a medical archive. She might find a woman who was petite, perhaps growth-stunted, hiding chronic pain behind a golden mask. She might find evidence of the thyroid storm that gave her legendary energy, but also slowly consumed her. She might find a woman who looked less like a movie star and more like a warrior, someone who fought Rome with her mind while fighting her own DNA with her pharmacy. Finding Cleopatra won't just rewrite history textbooks. It will rewrite biology textbooks. It will finally answer the question that has haunted geneticists. Was she the genetic miracle who somehow escaped the curse of 45% inbreeding? Or was she the silent sufferer who ruled the ancient world in spite of crushing genetic odds? For now, the tunnel remains silent. The DNA sequencers are waiting. The ghost of the last pharaoh is still keeping her secrets. But here's what we know for certain, right now, today. The reality of Cleopatra is far more complex, far more human, and far more terrifying than the myth we fell in love with. She wasn't just beautiful. She was brilliant. She wasn't just seductive. She was strategic. She wasn't born a goddess. She Tut created herself as one, possibly fighting against her own biology every single day. And perhaps that makes her story even more powerful. Because if Cleopatra was indeed fighting a genetic time bomb, if she was battling chronic illness while ruling one of the ancient world's greatest civilizations,
Cleopatra is one of the most powerful women ever to come out of the ancient Mediterranean world.
if she was compensating for physical limitations with pure intellectual force, then she wasn't just remarkable despite her challenges. She was extraordinary because of them. Think about what that means. A woman born into a collapsing genetic prison, who should have been deformed, who should have been weak, who should have died young like so many of her siblings, instead became the most powerful woman in the ancient world. She spoke 9 languages, she commanded navies, she negotiated with Rome as an equal, she wrote books on medicine and cosmetics. She may have understood hereditary genetics 2,000 years before modern science. And she did all of this while possibly carrying genetic diseases that would have destroyed anyone else. For 2,000 years, we've debated whether Cleopatra was beautiful. We've argued about her ethnicity. We've romanticized her relationships. But we've been asking the wrong questions. The real question isn't whether she was beautiful. It's whether she was suffering. The real question isn't who she seduced. It's who she was trying to save, herself, her children, her dynasty. So when Kathleen Martinez finally breaks through that limestone and opens that tomb, which version of Cleopatra do you think we'll find? Will we find the genetic miracle? The 1 in a million lottery winner who walked through fire untouched? Or will we find the medical warrior, a woman who fought 2 wars simultaneously, one against Rome?
She was, after all, considered an enemy of Rome, and those writing about her lived in an empire that was founded on her defeat.
And one against her own DNA, and nearly won both. Maybe the most terrifying revelation isn't what the DNA will show us. maybe it's what we'll realize about ourselves. Because if Cleopatra achieved everything she did while fighting a genetic catastrophe, what does that say about human potential? What does it say about what we can overcome? What does it say about the power of intelligence, determination, and sheer force of will against impossible biological odds? The DNA analysis isn't just about solving an ancient mystery. It's about understanding that the woman we turned into a myth was far more impressive as a human being. The seductress was a scientist. The beauty queen was a biohacker. The romantic heroine was a genetic warrior fighting for her children's future. And that woman, the real woman beneath the legend, is far more worthy of our admiration than any Hollywood fantasy could ever be. The tunnel is waiting. The truth is coming. And when it finally emerges from the darkness, it won't diminish Cleopatra's legend. It will complete it. Because the greatest rulers aren't those born with every advantage. They're the ones who overcome every disadvantage and rule anyway. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what Cleopatra wanted us to understand all along. So here's my question for you. If they open that tomb tomorrow, and the DNA confirms she was fighting genetic illness her entire life, does that make her less impressive or more impressive? Does knowing she might have been in pain, might have been compensating for physical limitations, might have been medicating herself just to function, does that diminish her achievements or magnify them? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But before you go, there's one more piece of this puzzle we need to address. One final, chilling detail that brings everything together. Remember those golden tongues we found at the beginning? Those mummies buried with the power to speak to Osiris? Recent analysis of the tomb positions reveals something extraordinary. They weren't randomly placed. They were arranged in a specific pattern, a corridor formation, like a royal procession frozen in time. They're not just waiting, they're announcing. And the tunnel? The one Kathleen Martinez discovered? Ground-penetrating radar has just revealed
Ground Penetrating Radar, or GPR, is a powerful tool used across fields like archaeology, engineering, and environmental assessments.
it doesn't end at the sea. It turns. It curves back inland, and it terminates directly beneath a chamber that has never been excavated. A chamber that's completely sealed. A chamber showing signs of deliberate flooding with mercury. An ancient preservation technique reserved only for the most sacred burials. A chamber that, according to the latest remote sensing technology, contains a stone sarcophagus. And here's what makes your blood run cold. Carved into the bedrock above that chamber is a single hieroglyph. One symbol that changes everything. The symbol of Isis. Not just any representation. The full throne symbol. The mark that only one woman in history had the right to use. The mark of Cleopatra VII Philopator, the last pharaoh of Egypt. For 2,000 years, we've been looking for her in the wrong place, asking the wrong questions, expecting the wrong answers. We expected to find a seductress. We're about to uncover a scientist. We expected to find a beauty queen. We're about to meet a warrior. We expected to find a woman destroyed by her genetics. We might discover a woman who conquered them. The excavation resumes in 3 months. The team has the permits. The technology is ready. The world is watching. And when they finally break through that seal, when they finally lift the lid of that sarcophagus, when they finally extract that DNA, we won't just be solving the greatest mystery in ancient history. We'll be meeting the real woman who has been hiding beneath the legend for 2 millennia. The woman who knew that if she couldn't control how history remembered her face, she could at least control how it remembered her mind. The woman who understood that the greatest magic isn't beauty, it's survival against impossible odds. And you know what the most terrifying part is? She planned this. She planned for us to find her this way. In a location so remote, so protected, so ingeniously hidden, that it could only be discovered by the technology of the future. She knew we would judge her by her appearance, so she made sure we couldn't find her until we were advanced enough to understand her biology. She knew we would debate her ethnicity, so she left us physical evidence that would force us to confront our own biases. She knew we would reduce her to romance and seduction, so she hid herself where only serious science could reach her. Cleopatra didn't just hide her body, she hid it on purpose, in a way that would force us, 2,000 years later, to appreciate her for what she actually was. Not a face, not a myth, not a fantasy, but a mind. A brilliant, strategic, scientific mind that understood genetics before we had words for it, that mastered chemistry before we called it that played the longest game in human history. She's been waiting for us to be smart enough to find her, and now, finally, we are. So I'll ask you one more time, and I want you to really think about this. When they open that tomb and sequence that DNA, which queen do you think we'll find? The genetic miracle who defied nature, or the medical warrior who conquered it? Drop your prediction in the comments. Tell me what you think is waiting in that sealed chamber. And if this journey through ancient Egypt, through genetics, through the terrifying reality of royal inbreeding has fascinated you as much as it's fascinated me, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, and turn on notifications. Because when Kathleen Martinez breaks through that final seal, when the DNA results come back, when we finally meet the real Cleopatra, you're going to want to be here for it. The sands of Egypt have kept her secret for 2,000 years, but the sands are shifting. The tomb is waiting. And the truth? The truth is about to emerge from the darkness. The DNA of Cleopatra has finally been analyzed, and what it revealed isn't just terrifying, it's awe-inspiring. It's the story of a woman who refused to be defined by her biology, who turned genetic catastrophe into legendary power, who understood that survival isn't about what you're born with, it's about what you refuse to let defeat you. Cleopatra didn't just rule Egypt, she ruled her own DNA. And that makes her more than a queen. That makes her eternal. Thanks for watching. The mystery continues. And we'll be here when the tomb finally opens, because the greatest story in human history is still being written, and you just became part of it.